Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're getting into something really crucial, I think, for anyone in the thick of academic research. This is specifically for you if you're a PhD student, maybe a junior researcher working in economics, econometrics, or finance. Fields where, let's be honest, the pressure can feel immense.
It really can. And it's vital we talk about this because there's this narrative, isn't there, that the huge stress, the burnout, sometimes even depression, well, that's just part of the deal. It's somehow
Yeah.
seen as normal for a PhD.
Yeah, and accepting that normal is exactly the problem. Look, a bit of pressure, okay, that can focus you, but the kind of overwhelming stress we often see, that's different. It actually works against you.
It really does. It limits your cognitive function, your ability
Yeah.
to think clearly, to learn effectively. And for a researcher, this is critical. It hampers your ability to tackle those really hard, novel problems.
It basically sabotages the very thing you're trying to do.
We somehow bought into this idea that folks operating right at the edge of human knowledge, building complex new models, pushing finance theory forward, should just accept feeling crippled by anxiety. But the sources we're looking at argue pretty strongly this isn't a badge of honor, it's a warning sign. It suggests the approach is broken, not the person.
Right. So our mission today is to maybe redefine what a PhD actually is, to move away from these old frameworks that seem to bake in stress and towards practices that will actually boost your effectiveness as a scholar. Let's start with that definition then. What is a PhD, really?
Well, when you ask people, you often get these slightly vague answers, right? Like making an original contribution or becoming an independent scholar, which are true, I guess, as outcomes. But they don't give you much practical direction day to day. We need something more concrete, more actionable.
And this is where the thinking gets interesting. We tend to see the PhD as the absolute top, the pinnacle of the whole education system.
Exactly. But the sources challenge that directly. They say, no, think about it differently. The PhD isn't the top of the old pyramid. It's the entry qualification for professional academia. It's actually the bottom of a brand new pyramid, the professional research career pyramid.
The bottom, okay, that feels counterintuitive. Doesn't that kind of downplay the massive effort involved? How does thinking of it as the bottom actually help with stress?
Because it fundamentally reframes failure. Think about it. If you see the PhD as the absolute peak of, say, 20 years of education, then any serious setback feels like a catastrophe, like your entire academic life has failed. But if you see it as essentially entry-level professional training, well, setbacks become training challenges, things to overcome as you learn the ropes. It's a much healthier way to look at it mentally. It acknowledges you're still learning the profession.
Okay, that makes sense. You're learning the job, not proving you're already the finished article. And maybe this explains why so many incredibly bright people hit a wall, this undergraduate trap idea you mentioned.
Precisely. It's a trap. Because the skills and structures that made you succeed before are often radically different, sometimes even the opposite of what you need now.
Let's break that down. Like in undergrad, you had a clear syllabus, right? Defined boundaries.
Yep. Clear syllabus, dealing mostly with established knowledge. Your day was pretty structured, maybe hour-by-hour timetables.
Whereas in a PhD, suddenly there's no boundary on what you might need to know. You're wading into cutting-edge stuff where top experts are arguing constantly.
And your timetable.
Mm-hmm.
It goes from daily structure to maybe one big submission deadline a year,
Mm-hmm.
the day-to-day, the week-to-week. That's entirely on you to manage. It's self-directed.
And the assessment changes completely, too, from getting grades along the way
Cumulative grades, yeah. Rewarding consistent execution within known parameters.
to basically a single pass-fail exam at the very end, the Viva. And the goal isn't just finding a known answer anymore.
No, often the goal is defining a good question and figuring out if a solution is even possible. You might spend months on approaches that necessarily fail. That's part of the process.
So those skills that got you the top marks before, like following the rules really well, executing set tasks perfectly, they don't map directly. Sometimes they're the opposite of the independence and resilience you need now.
Exactly. And trying to succeed using the old toolkit, just working harder and harder, that's where the intense stress comes from. You're pushing against the wrong door.
Which leads us nicely to this idea about skill development. We often think intellectual growth is like weightlifting, right?
Yeah.
Push harder, lift more weight, get stronger.
That analogy comes up a lot, but it can be quite misleading for complex intellectual work like research.
How so? If I'm trying to lift more weight, eventually I hit a point where I just can't. I plateau.
Right. And why do you plateau? Often it's not because you lack raw strength or effort. It's because your technique is the limiting factor. Your form breaks down.
Okay.
And if you just keep trying to pile on more weight, like longer work hours or reading faster when your technique is shaky, that's when you increase stress, risk injury, burnout.
So you're saying the limit isn't where the growth happens.
The limit is where you test your preparation. It's the performance. But the real growth, the skill building, happens away from that absolute edge. Top performers, whether they're athletes or academics, spend most of their time on the component parts. Fundamentals, technique, careful preparation, not constantly redlining.
Because if the fundamentals are weak,
They get exposed immediately when you try to tackle something really complex or push towards your knowledge boundary.
okay, so if the bottleneck isn't just effort, but technique,
Yeah.
how do we apply that to maybe the biggest early stage bottleneck? The literature review, that feeling of drowning in paper.
Oh, that's universal. I ran a search and got 10,000 results. How can I possibly read all this? Panic.
Yeah, the default reaction is, I need to read faster, or I need to work more hours.
But again, that's focusing on load, not technique. The goal isn't just volume or speed. It's selecting the right papers for a specific strategic purpose. We need a more technical, structured approach.
Okay, walk us through that. How do we break down that mountain of, say, 10,000 papers into something manageable using this technique idea?
We can think about it in roughly 4 layers, moving from the general foundation up to the specifics of your work. First, you absolutely need to identify the common concepts.
Common concepts. What do you mean exactly?
These are the handful of really fundamental ideas or theories that underpin a whole area of research. Like in finance, you need to properly grasp basic asset pricing before you can really understand complex derivative models built on top.
Right. In econometrics, too, there's often assumed knowledge. If you haven't mastered the underlying math or theory, the advanced papers just won't make sense. You'll be lost.
Exactly. So that's layer 1. Layer 2 is identifying common techniques. This is super important for anyone doing quantitative work.
Okay, so methods.
Yeah, recurring methodological approaches. You need to recognize the standard tools and how they're typically applied or adapted. Like understanding the difference between Denis and synthetic controls, or knowing the common ways people handle time series data issues. Recognizing these patterns lets you categorize papers quickly.
So you're not reading every single paper in detail, but you understand the methodological landscape.
Precisely. Then layer 3, which is high leverage, the major breakthroughs.
The big paper.
The handful of papers in any field that genuinely shifted the conversation. Think Fama French 92 or something similar in your specific area. These papers create ripple effects, sort of shock waves. You have to properly master these because so much subsequent work is reacting to them, refining them, arguing about them. Understanding the later incremental stuff requires knowing the original breakthrough inside out.
Okay. Concepts, techniques, breakthroughs, and the final layer.
Then finally, you get to the direct competition. These are the papers that are really close to your specific research question or approach, even if they aren't necessarily landmark papers historically.
Got it. So the message is, slow down to speed up.
Essentially, yes. Slow down initially. Master the concepts and techniques first. Get that foundation solid. If you don't understand the common language and tools, jumping straight to the very latest paper debating some fine point won't help because the authors assume you already have that base knowledge. Once that foundation is strong, then you can accelerate and process new related work much more effectively.
And this principle, this focus on technique and solid foundations, it applies to actually doing the research too, right? Not just reading about it. I see a lot of junior researchers rush to get any result to show their supervisor.
Absolutely. And that rush often leads to, well, unreliable work, errors in code, problems with data cleaning, steps missed in simulations. It leads to huge frustration down the line. Prioritizing speed over the structural integrity of the process is a false economy.
Especially with big quantitative projects.
Definitely. Imagine you're doing something complex, like backtesting a model on years of high-frequency data or running intricate simulations. If you start with a full scale immediately and something is wrong, finding that subtle error in your code or data pipeline becomes incredibly difficult. It's like finding a needle in a haystack.
So what's the more robust, professional way to build that technique?
Start small, really small if necessary. Take one tiny piece of the process, maybe just reading in one specific data file correctly, or implementing one single step of an algorithm. Practice it, test it rigorously, refine it until you are absolutely confident that that specific step is reliable, unbreakable. Don't even think about scaling up until those individual component parts are solid.
And if you hit a problem,
Slow down even more. Narrow your focus onto just that one problematic step. Stay with it. Debug it meticulously. Eliminate that weakness before moving on. This focus on the reliability of each component prevents those errors from propagating and compromising the final large-scale result.
This all sounds like a shift away from the lone genius struggling in isolation model.
It absolutely
That
is.
brings us to collaboration, which feels like a really crucial professional skill, but maybe one that feels awkward after years of individual assessment.
It's totally essential for professional survival and success, actually.
Mhm.
The sources we looked at were clear. Networking, collaboration, asking for help, these are vital. Postdoc offers, future projects, they often come through people you know and have worked with effectively.
Right.
And you have to actively unlearn that old copying is cheating mindset from school. In research, building on others' work, getting feedback, sharing methods, that's how science progresses.
People worry about getting their ideas stolen, though.
Sure, that's a background concern, maybe. But honestly, the far bigger risk, especially early on, is isolating yourself. Doing work that isn't as good as it could be because you didn't tap into collective expertise, or making a fundamental error that someone else could have easily spotted. Work that's flawed isn't worth stealing anyway.
That's a good point. Okay, so meticulous process, collaboration. But even then, research is messy, things go wrong. I remember one source mentioning a really tough period, a burnout after a major setback. Something about dropping optical fibers.
Yeah, that was a powerful story. Months of careful work literally smashed on the floor. A total progress stall.
Yeah.
And the key point was how the researcher eventually got through that deep burnout and finished successfully.
What was the shift?
It came down to really embracing that meticulous component part focus we've been talking about, but also a couple of key mindset changes when facing that failure.
Okay, so the first one we've covered, stop trying to rush the end result. Focus only on executing each small step perfectly. What were the others?
The second one was quite specific and maybe surprising. They made a conscious rule: stop checking email whenever they felt stuck on a hard intellectual problem or just generally felt uncomfortable about the work.
Stop checking email. Why? They called it the email anesthetic, right?
Exactly. Think about it. You hit a really tough spot, a bug you can't fix, a theoretical knot you can't untangle. It feels bad. It's uncomfortable. Checking email gives you an instant hit of something else, a little dopamine rush from clearing the inbox, a feeling of being busy, of being productive, even if it's low-level stuff. It temporarily numbs the discomfort of the real hard thinking you need to be doing.
Ah, it's an escape route. A way to avoid sitting with the difficult problem.
Precisely. By consciously not taking that escape route, they forced themselves to stay engaged with the difficult task until they made progress, or at least understood it better. It helped build intellectual resilience.
That's a really interesting practical tactic. Okay, so meticulous components, no email anesthetic. What was the third change?
Letting go of external validation, basically stop worrying about the final outcome, stop obsessing over what the examiners might think, stop focusing on all those things that are ultimately outside your direct control.
It's easier said than done, surely.
Well, definitely. But the shift was to focus only on the elements they could control. The quality of the immediate task, the robustness of their method, the clarity of their writing and presentation now. By accepting the inherent uncertainty of the final research outcome, because it is research, you don't know the answer. Beforehand, the pressure decreased. And paradoxically, the work likely became more confident because it was less driven by anxiety.
Which leads us, I guess, to the final point about what academic confidence really looks like.
Yes, it's not about knowing you'll succeed. If you knew the answer for sure, it wouldn't be research, would it?
Okay.
Real academic confidence, the sustainable kind, comes from something different. It comes from accepting the risk, committing to giving it your absolute best shot using sound, reliable processes,
Yeah.
and crucially trusting that you have the resilience to cope with whatever outcome occurs, even if it's failure, even if you have to pivot or rethink everything.
So it's confidence in your process and your resilience, not necessarily in a specific result.
Exactly. That acceptance frees you up mentally to actually do the hard, uncertain work without being paralyzed by fear.
That feels like incredibly valuable advice for anyone navigating this. Okay, let's try and quickly summarize the core ideas from this deep dive for everyone listening. First, try reframing the PhD. It's not the pinnacle, it's the entry point to a professional career that helps manage expectations and setbacks. Second, recognize the undergraduate trap. The skills needed now are different. Prioritize developing research technique over just brute force load or hours worked.
Focus on the components.
Yes, focus on meticulous component part processes, build reliability from the ground up, and apply that same strategic component-focused thinking to the literature review concepts, techniques, breakthroughs, then competition.
Spot on.
And finally, build confidence through acceptance of uncertainty and focus on your process and resilience.
Absolutely. And perhaps I can offer one final, maybe provocative thought for you to take away and consider. It's something that often gets pushed aside but is critical.
Go for it.
You need to actively, deliberately ring-fence time for non-work activities. Hobbies, exercise, seeing friends, whatever genuinely recharges you. And here's the crucial part. This time cannot be treated as a reward you get after you've done enough work. It needs to be a non-negotiable commitment in your schedule that your PhD work fits around, not the other way, vice versa.
That sounds difficult to actually implement when deadlines loom.
It is difficult. It requires discipline. But think of it this way, that protected downtime isn't just a nice-to-have break. It's when your subconscious often works on complex problems. It prevents burnout. And perhaps most importantly, it acts as a vital safety net. If, for whatever reason, your specific research project hits a dead end or doesn't pan out, having other sources of identity and satisfaction in your life is incredibly important for your well-being and long-term resilience.
So it's not just self-care, it's actually part of being a sustainable professional.
Exactly. It's a commitment to your own professional longevity in this demanding career. Something to really think about.